All right, the Saturday afternoon intelligence for February 28, 2026 has just unveiled a massive structural rift in the global over-the-counter markets that effectively renders the previous paper price of precious metals as a historical curiosity. While the public retail channels remain locked behind the bank holiday protocols, the John C.C. Archive has gained access to the private shadow ledger data used by international settlement hubs in Zurich and Singapore. Today's data confirms that the shadow price for physical gold has cleared $4,500 in the private Tier 1 settlement blocks, a move that represents a total collapse of the digital dollar's credibility among the world's primary resource holders. We are documenting the final hours of the old monetary logic as the physical weight of the vaults becomes the only recognized ledger for international trade. The silver shadow market is experiencing an even more violent detachment from the legacy prices, with off-book transactions now being recorded at premiums that exceed 200% of the Friday close. We are receiving verified reports from the logistics sector that every available ounce of industrial-grade silver is being sequestered by state entities to prevent a total technological blackout of the defense and aerospace infrastructure. The math of the 2026 reset is now reaching its most critical phase, where the lack of physical metal is no longer just a financial problem, but a terminal threat to the functioning of modern civilization. John C.C. is the strategic archive for this transition, where we look past the managed silence of the central banks to see the raw movement of the world's remaining physical wealth. Internal reports from the International Monetary Fund indicate that the special drawing rights system has entered a state of terminal paralysis because the constituent currencies no longer have a verifiable link to a physical anchor. This has forced the IMF into an emergency contingency plan, where cross-border trade between major blocks is being settled in weight-equivalent gold and silver units. This is the de facto return to a global gold standard by necessity, occurring in the shadows while the Western public is told that the banking freeze is merely a technical upgrade. The archives will show that the transition to the new physical world was finalized on this Saturday, as the digital settlement nodes were permanently disconnected from the physical resources they once claimed to represent. Inventory data from the private vaulting networks proves that the elite have successfully moved their primary holdings into non-jurisdictional zones that are immune to the bail-in decrees currently being drafted in Washington and Brussels. While the average person's wealth is trapped behind a digital firewall of system errors and ATM blackouts, the volume of physical bullion moving through private transport channels has reached an all-time high. This is the great wealth decoupling that we have been tracking in these archives, where the winners are determined not by the size of their digital balance, but by the physical security of their hard assets. If your silver and gold are not in your direct possession, or in a truly private facility, the data suggests you are now a spectator in the reset of your own history. The industrial impact of this Saturday's data is a total halt in the procurement of strategic metals for the G7 nations, as the Eastern producers have officially stopped accepting paper credits for their raw materials. We are seeing the first signs of a total supply chain collapse in the telecommunications and high-speed computing sectors, as the physical silver required for subcomponent manufacturing has vanished into the sovereign hordes of the resource-holding nations. The John C.C. Archive has consistently cross-referenced the warehouse depletion rates with industrial output, and today the two lines have finally met at zero. You cannot maintain a digital empire on a foundation of empty vaults, and today that reality has become the primary driver of the global economic narrative. Capital controls have been tightened this afternoon to a level that effectively prevents any private individual from converting their remaining digital fiat into physical assets. We are seeing reports from the few remaining gold dealers who have not been nationalized that their bank accounts have been administratively flagged to prevent the settlement of large bullion purchases. This is the final stage of the trap, where the doors are closed to prevent the masses from front-running the official revaluation of the currency against gold. The archives of 2026 will document this period as the moment the state officially prioritized its own survival over the property rights of the individual, proving that sovereignty is only possible through direct physical ownership. Geopolitical sources confirm that the European Central Bank is currently in emergency discussions with the BIS to create a new unified digital euro that is explicitly linked to a physical metal reserve held in neutral territory. This is an admission that the UN-backed paper system has failed and that trust can only be restored through a physical anchor. However, the data proves that the physical metal required to back such a currency has already moved to the east, leaving the Western central banks in a state of terminal insolvency. The John C.C. mission is to provide the data-driven map of this collapse so that the sovereign individual can navigate the ruins of the paper era and build on the reality of the physical standard. The shadow banking sector is currently being vaporized as the collateral chains for trillions in derivatives are being dissolved by the physical shortage. Every paper ounce of silver that was used to create leverage in the markets is now being revealed as a multi-claim fraud, leading to a legal and financial paralysis that no court system can resolve. This is the mathematical singularity of the 2026 reset, where the infinite digital debt finally hits the immovable wall of the physical world. The vaults are empty of paper promises and are now being filled with the reality of a new physical standard that will define the next 100 years of human history. We are seeing a total blackout of these shadow prices on all mainstream financial platforms, as the National Economic Stability Act has been used to censor any information that contradicts the official central bank narrative. However, the John C.C. archive is being updated through encrypted satellite feeds and decentralized storage to ensure that the record of this transition remains available to those who seek the truth. The rate of currency devaluation in the shadow markets is now exceeding 1% per hour, leading to a state of total economic disorientation for those who are still waiting for the digital grid to return to normal. If you are waiting for an official announcement, you are ignoring the data that is already screaming from the logistics reports of the world's transit hubs. The psychological warfare being deployed this afternoon is focused on order and security and the promise of a new social credit standard that will restore the people's purchasing power by Monday morning. This is the final deception of the old world order, designed to move the population from a failed debt system into a programmable surveillance system where every transaction is a permission-based event. Sovereignty requires you to recognize this trap and to ensure that your wealth is anchored in the physical world where it cannot be tracked, frozen, or revalued by a central committee. The archives of 2026 will be the primary source for understanding how the global population was managed during the transition to the new physical era. The 150-day moving average has moved into a vertical climb that defies all standard technical analysis, representing the total abandonment of the fiat currency units by the world's primary resource holders. There is no longer a chart in the traditional sense. There is only a record of a currency dying in real time against the only things that cannot be printed or manufactured by an algorithm. This is the great decoupling where physical assets finally break free from the paper gravity that has held them down for generations. The data shows that the demand for physical bars at the sovereign level is already 100 times higher than the total available supply, creating a vacuum that will consume the value of every other legacy asset class. We are entering the final hours of the weekend blackout, where the world will wait in silence to see the new form of the global monetary standard. The reports from the private security industry indicate that the primary vaults in the G7 are being harmonized under a unified military command to back the new emergency digital settlement units. The door to secure your own family's wealth has not just closed, it has been barricaded by the total power of the state to preserve its own existence. Scarcity is the only law that matters on this Saturday, and those who did not stay physical are now facing a reality where their digital life savings are functionally worthless in the new resource-based economy. The synergy between the total energy blackout and the financial freeze is creating a state of nature for the Western financial markets. As the cost of maintaining the digital grid exceeds the actual value of the debt it carries, the system is naturally defaulting to the physical standard of the vaults. The John C.C. archive has consistently shown that you cannot build a digital empire on a foundation of paper lies, and today that foundation has officially collapsed. We are recording the final data points of the paper regime so that the sovereign individuals of the future can understand the mathematical inevitability of the collapse and the absolute necessity of staying sovereign through the possession of physical resources. Stay physical, stay sovereign, and stay tuned to the John C.C. archive because the events of the next 48 hours will define the economic destiny of the human race for the next century. The global market has reset, the paper mask has been torn away, and the physical truth is finally taking its throne in the halls of power and the vaults of the sovereign. Thank you for watching, and remember to always verify the raw warehouse data before you trust the scripted promises of a bankrupt administration. The clock has struck midnight for the old world, and Saturday, February 28, 2026, is the day the ledger was finally settled in the weight of real, physical metal. The midday shadow market update confirms that the BIS has officially suspended the gold pool settlement mechanism, effectively ending the last coordinated attempt to suppress the price of the metal. Every nation is now effectively an island of debt, forced to rely on whatever physical gold and silver it has managed to secure within its own borders before the lockdown. We are seeing the total fragmentation of the global trade system, where only nations with a resource-backed currency are able to participate in the new economy. The data proves that the era of globalism was a debt-fueled hallucination that has finally been corrected by the reality of the vaults. Intellectual honesty requires us to record that the coming Sunday will likely see a controlled communication outage as the government attempts to regain control of the economic narrative before Monday's unveiling. If your digital devices stop functioning, remember that the physical truth of your assets remains unchanged by the status of the network or the silence of the state. The trend of the 2026 reset is mathematically locked, and no amount of censorship can bring back the physical metal that has already left the Western exchanges. The time for speculation is officially over. The time for direct physical ownership is all that remains for those who wish to survive the transition. The 150 exponential moving average has been replaced by a vertical spike that represents the final short squeeze of the global banking architecture. The banks that sold what they did not have are now being systematically liquidated, and their assets are being absorbed by the sovereign entities that respect the laws of physical scarcity. The data proves that the world has moved beyond the point of hedging and into a state of total revaluation, where the possession of physical resources is the only metric that defines purchasing power in the new era. Monday morning will not be an opening. It will be a revelation of the new physical reality of the world. In a world of total digital deception and central bank manipulation, the raw, verifiable movement of physical silver and gold is the only beacon of truth that cannot be extinguished. The Monday warning was the alert, the Thursday force majeure was the signal, and the Saturday shadow price spike is the reality of the end. The Strategic Archive has captured every moment of this historic transition, and we will continue to provide the data of the new physical standard as the world rebuilds from the ruins of the paper era. Stay physical, stay sovereign, and watch the John C.C. Archive as we navigate the first hours of the new economic world. Every ounce of metal that is physically delivered today is an ounce that will never return to the paper clearing system. The data from the transport nodes proves that the smart money is not just exiting the dollar, they are exiting the entire digital infrastructure of the West. This is the moment where the shadow price becomes the only price that matters, as the official tickers have lost all relevance to the real world. Sovereignty is not a gift given by a central authority. It is a physical act of owning your own value outside of their reach. The archives of this Saturday afternoon are the record of that sovereign act. In the final minutes of this archive session, we must acknowledge that the silence of the banks is the loudest data point in the history of the 2026 reset. When the system controllers stop talking, it is because they are moving the last of the physical collateral to the safety of their own private hoards. Stay physical, verify the warehouse reports, and remember that in the archives of history, the only wealth that survives a systemic collapse is the wealth you can hold in your hand. The digital mask is gone, and the physical truth is all that remains.